everybody? Welcome back to Tavian's World of Reptiles. I hope you guys are all healthy and happy and hope you're doing all well with your reptiles. I hope you had a good love day. If you celebrate that, if you don't, I hope you just had another good day. So today I am talking with you guys about quarantine, why we quarantine, when we quarantine, suggested methods of quarantine, and how long we are suggested to quarantine. And today, with us today is my Brazilian rainbow boa Toph. She is looking lovely today. Her markings are just always so fantastic. I just love it. So, please ignore any noise you hear in the background. I do live with a family of five, 3 children, and so there's bound to be some background noise on the occasion. So, just putting that out there. Go ahead and disregard that if you happen to hear anything. So why do we quarantine? We quarantine for them. We quarantine for the new snake that you bring into your house. You quarantine for the snakes that you already have in your house. Snakes can come with various diseases that are very easily spread amongst other snakes. They can come with parasites that are easily spread amongst other snakes. And so to avoid this, you want to go ahead and give a quarantine to your snakes when you first bring them home. This means that they don't interact with your snakes in any way, shape, or form. You don't bring them into the same space as your other snakes, so that we can properly diagnose and look at the snake that we're bringing into our house. Even if you know where the snake has come from, even if you know its previous breeder, I don't care if it's your sister, your brother, your cousin, your best friend, or just a complete stranger, you always quarantine your snakes, because snakes can hold parasites or they can hold diseases that are laying dormant and not quite visible, and maybe the previous owner didn't quite see that yet, and now you've brought it into your home, and you would not want to bring that possibly diseased snake, possibly parasite infected snake around your other reptiles, where they themselves then can become infected with the disease or those parasites. If you are able to look at the one snake that you're bringing in, you're able to see beforehand if that snake has a disease or not. So quarantining that snake in a very simplistic enclosure will allow you to be able to observe the snake, see if the snake has mites or any other type of parasite on the outside. If you want, it never hurts to take your snakes into the vet to see if there's any type of internal parasite, but you can also keep them in quarantine so that you can be able to see if those internal parasites start to show any outward effects, or if your snakes just start to show any type of signs of being sick, then you can immediately get that snake to a vet without risking your other reptiles becoming infected. So that's the most important reason why we quarantine. We quarantine for their health, so that we continue to have all of our snakes continue to be healthy. That way, if you have just the one, you can get that one taken care of without having to risk yourself multiple different vet trips for multiple different animals. So that's why. So when do we quarantine? As I kind of touched on in the why we quarantine, you want to quarantine the moment you bring your snake home. You really don't want to take that snake anywhere near the rest of your reptiles, because, like I said, things like mites, which is a parasite that can be found on the outside of the snake, can easily jump in really quick and really far distances very quickly, and they can get into your reptile enclosures and just go crazy. And mites are a pain in the butt to deal with. I personally have never dealt with them, but I have seen plenty of people who have dealt with them, and they are not fun, and I don't suggest you just ignoring that. You definitely want to quarantine to make sure that mites are not a potential thing that can spread amongst your other snakes. And so when you quarantine is the moment you bring them home. You do not want to take them anywhere near your other reptiles. For instance, if you got a snake from I don't know, a online source, and you've ordered it and it's come in a box, one thing you want to consider is where you're going to open this box, because you don't want to open it in your reptile room or where most of your reptiles are. You want to find a room that is as far away from your other reptiles as possible when you're doing that unboxing, because obviously you might have set up your enclosure if you had just gone and picked it up, but it's an unboxing is different. You never know, and now it's like the box itself could be contaminated, not just the snake itself. So really you want to find a whole different space when you're unboxing your snake. So when you quarantine is the very moment that you get your snake, the very moment you bring your snake home. Preferably if you've already set up your enclosure for your reptile, it's already in its quarantine location, meaning a place that is nowhere near your other reptiles. So how do you quarantine? Do you just keep the snakes on another side of the room from the other snakes? What does it mean to quarantine? Well, preferably, some people would say that the best thing would literally be having your snakes in a whole nother facility from your snakes. Of course, that's not a possibility for everybody. That's not something that everybody can do. So another suggested way of quarantining for somebody who doesn't have just a whole nother facility for your quarantine is to find a whole nother room for your snakes to be in. And some people say that's completely pointless because of how far things like mites can travel. But anything that you can do to keep from direct contact between this snake and your other snakes, you should really do it. If you have a whole nother room to keep your snakes in, do it. Some people who do believe that a whole nother facility is the most important thing say that that's a complete waste of time if you're not going to do that. But this is all, it's one of those slightly controversial topics, but not really. As long as you can have another space other than in your reptile room, I think that's a pretty good quarantine. Now, there are some people who can't even do that. Like if you just have your one snake, right, or your two snakes, and you don't have a lot of space, you got like one room, then I guess the opposite end of the room is a thing that can be done. You will take a lot more precautions with that. Not that you shouldn't take all these precautions anyway. When you are doing this quarantine, you want to make sure that you are definitely washing your hands when you are doing your quarantine. Before, I would suggest holding your snakes that are not in quarantine before you go and handle your snake that is in quarantine. And then of course you want to have a lot of hand sanitizer on deck, because you definitely don't want to go from touching any one snake over to touching this other one that is in quarantine. Just before, like I said, for the snake's health, for parasite reasons, for things that can be transmitted from your hands to the other snake, like respiratory infections. Those are ways for that can spread. Like direct contact with these diseases to the other snake is how that happens. And so when it comes to quarantine, it's not even just keeping a different space, it's also when you're handling them, how clean you are. Some people would even suggest completely changing your clothes, maybe even taking a shower before going from your quarantine to your non-quarantine area, just to really ensure that nothing gets spread. You do what you think is best for your reptiles, but at the end of the day, quarantine is the most important thing, and you just have to find a way to make a quarantine happen if you're going to bring another reptile into your home when you already have a reptile. And like I said before, it doesn't matter where your source is from. This is something that absolutely must happen. Also, thing to keep in mind when you're quarantining is very simplistic enclosures. I said it earlier, but I want to go a little bit more in detail about that. You've seen in my enclosures, I have a lot of decor in it, and one of the things that we always want to do is immediately stick our reptiles in this really lovely enclosure that we've just put together for them. But reality, when you are quarantining your snake, you should keep them in the most simplistic enclosures you can, preferably something like paper towels and a water bowl with maybe something to climb on. But that's to be about it, because you want to be able to see things on those paper towels like mites that might be there, and you can't see that as well if you actually have it on a substrate. So that's the reason why you might want to keep your enclosure very simplistic. You want to be able to see exactly how your snake is maneuvering around, how it's acting, and how it's moving without things, hindering your sight and making things more difficult than they need to be for you. So remember also to have a very simple enclosure when it comes to your quarantine methods. And last but not least, how long do you quarantine? This seems to be one that I see all across the board. There are people who say up to a year. Some people say 9 months, anywhere between 6 months, 3 months, 90 days. 30 days even. But some people say the longer you can, the better, and I think I'm gonna go with that. I usually have gone in the previous homes, the longest that I could go comfortably without disrupting my household, which is keeping my snakes in this other room, which was the living room, was about 30 to 90 days, or 30 to 60 days. I could push it to 60 days, but I would definitely prefer to go at least 90 days, which if I get any more reptiles from here on out, I will definitely be quarantining them for at least 90 days before I bring them back into my my home. But so far I've just been blessed and lucky enough not to have any incidences with that. But I definitely suggest the longer you can go, the better. I'm gonna go with that. Like I said, there's all across the board what people say, and you choose what you're feeling most comfortable with. You choose what you want to take the chance with your reptiles. And at the end of the day, even after quarantine, it never hurts to be sterile for a while until continuing to be excessive about keeping your hands sanitized when you're going from touching that snake to the other until you're not really sure. And just in general, you should just kind of be sanitary with your snakes and handling. So choose what you think works for you. I'm not a professional. I'm a hobbyist. I love doing this, and I'm constantly learning. I'm also always willing to hear what you guys suggest when it comes to these things. And I just do what I think what I'm comfortable with, and I think you should do what you're comfortable with and what you're willing to do for your snakes. What you can do for your snakes. Figure it out, because you can. You can figure it out how to quarantine your snakes appropriately. Maybe even call upon another friend who would be willing to keep that snake at their house for maybe a month or two. But yeah, so quarantine is super important regardless of how you choose to do it or how long you choose to do it. It is something that you absolutely need to do for the health of your snakes, for the health of this new snake that you're bringing in, for the health of the snakes that you already have. And I'm going mostly on snakes. I don't know much about reptiles or how much quarantining reptiles. I said lizards specifically. I don't know exactly. When I first got my iguana, I was asking around how long should I quarantine my iguana, and people were like, you don't have to quarantine your iguana because it's not going to affect your snakes. Other people were like, well, the same amount you would with your snakes. There were various different opinions on that one, so I'm not going to speak too much on when it comes to quarantining lizards, because I don't know enough. I made what I could work for my lizards, and it's not been a problem. But I definitely suggest looking into more sources when it comes to quarantining lizards, because I know more about snakes than I do lizards. So, anyway, this is TWR. Me and Toph have enjoyed talking to you guys today. I hope you guys liked the video. I tried not to make it too long, but I do tend to ramble. So, alright, you guys love yourselves, love your reptiles, love your loved ones, and you guys keep spreading those herbs.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face. Tell me that you love me, even